Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today I'm going to do a full setup guide for the Retroid Pocket 5. It also applies to the Retroid Pocket Mini, but it also applies to any Android handheld. So it is not just the Retroid Pocket 5. I'm going to do a section just related to that. Anybody else that is just setting up a Retroid or an Anbernic or any other type of Android handheld, you can use this guide. And this is going to be my general emulation guide for Android. So very first thing, before we even do anything, you're going to want an SD card depending on the device that you get. So I have here a 1TB A2. Doesn't need to be A2, you could do A1 if you want. I just prefer using A2 SD cards. And it just depends on the size that you want. With a Retroid Pocket 5, I wanted a bigger sized SD card because it can play a lot of the higher end systems, and those take up a lot of space. So just use your own judgment. Depends on what you want to play, depends on what you want to do on here, but I would suggest going higher rather than lower if you're going to, especially if the device can play Switch and PS2 and GameCube and all of that. Now, if you're here before buying your device, you can set up the SD card before you get this. Or, if you want, we can set it up on the actual device. So I'm going to switch over right now to the computer. We're going to show you how to set up the SD card ahead of time so that you're ready when this device comes to just pop it in and off you go. And then I'll show you on the device after we get through setup and all of that. So when you set up an SD card on the computer, you need to make sure that the format of the SD card is exFAT. And you can do that easily in Windows. You just right-click the drive, format as exFAT, and off you go. Once you have a blank SD card, you just need to create a folder, and we're just going to call it ROMs. And then inside of that, you can create subfolders for each system. So for example, if you have GBA for Game Boy Advance, or GC for GameCube, or SNES for Super Nintendo, and so on. And you just keep going until you create all of the system folders for the systems that you want to play or that you have games for. I would also do a BIOS folder as well, so that you could have all of your BIOS files inside of it. And that way it's just easy and ready to go. So just to recap, before you get the device, you can format an SD card as exFAT, create a ROMs folder, put some system folders inside, transfer all of your ROMs over into the system folders, put your BIOS files inside of the BIOS folder, and you'll be ready. And if you have some confusion as to what BIOS files are, or maybe what BIOS files to get, I'll leave some links in the description to more information on that. Okay, so let's go through setup here, and this is going to apply to pretty much any device, but you just want to go through the setup of the device and basically just set up your internet, all that sort of thing. So I'm going to do that now. And now we arrive to the very first screen that you can actually make a change for, and you want Google Play services on here, at least if you're going to follow today's guide. So we're going to let that go. And now here's the biggest thing. Retroid includes some apps pre-installed already. The problem is these are very, very, very out of date. And so when we talk about out of date apps, you don't want to start off on the wrong foot. And so all of these that are here, we're going to skip. For example, RetroArch is 1.16. We are currently on 1.19. We are very far ahead of that. Aether SX2 and all of that, we're going to ignore this. So all you're going to do is push R1. And you don't want to install any apps because I'm going to show you how to do them. That's today's guide. And on this screen here, are you going to use Retroid's Launcher or not? I am not going to be using Retroid's Launcher. If you want to use Retroid's Launcher, that is up to you. But for today's guide, we are going to use a different front end called Daigisho. But I mean, the front end is up to you. I'm going to help you set up all of the emulators, and then you can choose what front end you want to display them all, or maybe you don't want a front end at all. So for this, we're going to choose AOSP Launcher, and then we're going to click Next, and we're going to complete the start. Perfect. We are now on the home screen here, and we can get started. Very first thing that we want to do is obviously insert the SD card. And I get a lot of questions about this, of how to insert an SD card. So I'm going to show you right now. For this specific model is actually face down, like that, and then just slide it in. And you might need some, there you go, nails to get it in, and then you're good. So we have our SD card in for those that set it up ahead of time. Now, we're going to go through two different things. If you set this up ahead of time, you're going to see right here, SanDisk SD card in my case, and it's for storage and all that. And if I click it, I can explore my SD card. But what if you didn't? What if you have a brand new SD card because you didn't set it up ahead of time and now you want to set it up on the actual device? Okay, so what I did was I just popped out my old SD card, the one that I had set up already, and I put in a new one just so I can show you how you can set this up on the device if you want to and not set it up ahead of time. Same thing popped up here, and it might not pop up for you. So what I'm going to do is show you how to get there. So we're going to go slide down from the top. We're going to go to settings, so it's setting cog at the bottom. Scroll over, go to storage, and you're going to see here it says this device, and 64 gigs is what mine is called, but it'll be your SD card name. So just select that. And at this point, we have an SD card in there, but it is not formatted. We don't know what format it was in. So I'm going to click the three dots in the top right, go to format, and now it's going to say format SD card for portable storage. Depending on the Android device that you have, it might be a little bit different, but you want to make sure that it is portable storage. You do not want to format as internal storage. Never select that. So we're going to click format, and I'm going to click format again. And this is going to go through all of the steps. Now, remember, this is for anybody who didn't set it up ahead of time. So if you have your SD card set up, this is for everybody else. Click done, and now we have a formatted SD card. You can see they call it RP5, and we are set up. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to Files on the main screen, click the little three lines on the side, scroll down, and you're going to see RP5. Go right there, and this is our SD card now. And so if you remember earlier when I said setting it up earlier on Windows or on a computer, we can create a new folder here, and I'm going to create a new folder called ROMs. Same thing that we did on the computer earlier for everybody else, but we're doing it on the device now. Inside of that ROMs folder, I can create new folders for any system. So if I want to create one for, I like having it lowercase. So I'm going to create one for GBA. There's my GBA folder, then SNES and every other system, and then you put your ROMs inside of it. Should be pretty simple if you're understanding me. Now, you might be wondering, well, I just set up everything on the SD card and it's ready to go, but I want to transfer files over to it because I just told you to put your ROMs inside of those folders. And what you actually can do is connect this to your computer, and we're going to do that now. Okay, so to transfer files to the device, all you have to do, without taking out the SD card, connect it to your computer. You're going to see a pop-up, says no data transfer or file transfer. Click file transfer. And now on your actual computer, you're going to see a drive pop up, and it is the Retroid Pocket 5 or any Android device. And what you can do is now transfer files to that device. What I would make sure of, while you're transferring files, make sure that the screen stays on, or you could corrupt some files. I've had it happen many times on a lot of different devices. If the screen goes off, whatever you are transferring just cancels. So just make sure that that is always on and make it easy for yourself. Now, if that pop-up doesn't show up on the Android device that you're using, you can swipe down from the top and you'll see here it'll usually say charging or something. It'll have a notification. And if you select it, you'll see this sort of menu. And you have to find one that says file transfer or transfer, and then it'll work. Sometimes it'll only say charging, and it's not actual file transfer as well as charging. So just make sure that you come in here and you can change it. It might look a little bit different depending on your Android device. You can also transfer files using Wi-Fi and apps like that, but that is a little bit more advanced and we're not going to leave that for today. Okay, so now the very first thing we should do is check for updates for this system. And what I'm going to do is go over to the settings once again, scroll all the way down, and this is going to be different for every device, but for Retroid, it is in System, and then you want to go to Retroid Pocket FOTA, and we are just going to go for check version and see if there is any updates. There is not. I am still on a pre-release build here, so I don't have a new update to use. You're going to be on a newer build for your retail units. Let's do a bit of a tour so you understand where everything is. If you scroll down from the top, you have a brightness adjustment, you have Wi-Fi right here, and the way that you can get to that is just push and hold, and you can go and change Wi-Fi networks and everything that you want to do there. But if we head back, performance mode toggles, you can go ahead and change that from standard to performance to high performance, depending on the content you're playing. I usually just stay in standard until I need to change it. Joystick lights, if you want to turn on the joysticks. You can also tap it, and you can also change the colors, you can change the brightness of them. There's a bunch of different things you can do. If you head over, you can turn on the fan and change between quiet, smart, or sport. Depends on what you want to use. I usually just stay on quiet or smart. It never really turns on, really in my experience, so I usually keep it on either smart or quiet. Controller style here, you can change between Xbox, Retro, and Disconnect. I usually stay in Retro because that means A is confirm and B is cancel. Xbox would be good for any streaming that you're going to do, as well as any Android game, so it recognizes the controller. And that would make B X and A cancel. And then Disconnect is good if you're going to be connecting any external controllers, Bluetooth controllers and things like that. Heading over, you're going to see L2 and R2 mode is set to both analog or digital. You want to leave that as both, basically means that the triggers can be used in different games that need them for pressure sensitivity. So Super Mario Sunshine, for example, and things like that. Bluetooth works the same as Wi-Fi if you want to connect anything there. And then if you scroll over, one thing that's going to annoy a lot of people, you're going to see a white line in some games. That is the floating icon. And if you don't want that, just turn it off. I'll show you what that does in a game a little bit later on if you do want to have that sometimes. Otherwise, there is not much else you can do here. I usually turn off location because you just don't need location on these sorts of devices, and then we are set as far as this goes. What I do want to go and do now is head over to the Android settings screen, and this is where you can see a lot of what we just did, but in different sections. And one thing that I do want to change is I'm going to go over to display, and I like to set the screen timeout to 30 minutes, or the longest that you can do on the device. Basically just means the screen's not going to turn off for 30 minutes because I'm usually really good about turning it off myself. Another thing I'm going to do is turn on dark theme, because my eyes, and I like dark theme, but these are personal preferences. Now, while we're here in the Android settings, we can go over into another section, and this is just Retroid settings. And you can go into handheld settings, you can see some things here. So for example, Connect TV, there's a few things that it does when you're connected to a TV, USB status bar if you want to show the network speed up in the top, and other things like that. Now, I personally never touch any of this, but there might be some situations where you need to. So feel free to just come and see what's here if you want. And usually you might not need to do any of this, so don't worry about it. Now, I prefer 3-button navigation, so I change that there. Depends on what you want. I don't like using gestures, I like using the little buttons at the bottom, so we're going to do that. Now we are basically ready to start installing some emulators. And so, naturally, I'm going to start with the biggest one, and that is RetroArch. And RetroArch has basically every emulator that you can think of to and including PlayStation 1, and that's what we're going to use it for. There are many ways to install RetroArch. I'm going to show you the easiest. We're going to go to Chrome. We're going to use without an account, and I'm going to continue and allow. And I want to go to the RetroArch website. So I'm going to type in RetroArch, so it can search it in Google for me. We'll try and type in RetroArch. Head over to the RetroArch website. I'm going to click download. And now if you scroll down, you scroll past all of the ads and stuff because we're using Chrome and I didn't change that. And if we head over to Android, you'll see it right here. Scroll down. You do not want the Google Play version. It is very out of date. It is not good. You don't want any of the other ones. What you do want is 64-bit. Download 64-bit. And then you're going to get a pop-up. Just click download. And don't worry about it. It is not harmful. Except you're going to waste a lot of time playing video games. And now it's ready. So we're going to click open. And it's going to say, we can't do an install here. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And now we can click install. Now, if you happen to get screwed up at some point in this process, you can find this actual in your downloads folder. So if you go to Files app and you go over to the downloads folder, you can see it right there. So don't worry about it if you miss some pop-ups. It's just a downloaded file and you can click it and open it. We're going to install it. Now we're going to click open. We have to give it permissions. Don't skip this. So we're going to click OK and allow. And now let it do its thing. It's going to extract some stuff and we'll wait for it to finish. And basically, this is the main home screen of RetroArch, and don't worry, it is not as confusing as you think it might be. Very first thing we want to do is download some cores, and cores are basically emulators for RetroArch. So if we go over to the online updater, and right now B is going to be confirmed because we haven't swapped it. So we're going to go to Core Downloader, and this is where all of the systems and emulators for those systems are, and they're called cores. So what you can do, you might have different games than I do, but I'm going to scroll down, and for arcade, I'm going to use Final Burn Neo, and then I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to keep going for, let's say, Atari 2600. I'm going to use Stella, and we're going to keep going. For Nintendo DS, I'm actually going to use Melon DS. That is my suggested core for this. Nintendo Game Boy and Game Boy Color is Gambate. Game Boy Advance, MGBA. NES is FCUMM. We are going to skip Dolphin, and you're going to notice I skipped 3DS as well. Those are going to be standalone emulators, so just follow the ones that I'm installing. For Super Nintendo, we are going to do SNES 9X. For Dreamcast, we're going to do the Flycast Core. And then for Genesis, Game Gear, and all of the other Sega things, we're going to do Genesis Plus GX. For Saturn, we are going to do Beetle Saturn. For Neo Geo, I like to use Beetle Neopop. And lastly, for PlayStation, I like to use Swan Station. So those are all of the systems that we're going to use RetroArch for. And so we installed all of the cores for them. If we back out again, and now we want to move over to the side here. So you can either tap the settings cog or push right on the D-pad, and you're going to see we have some more settings to go through. Very first one, if we jump into user interface, we go to on-screen overlay, we're going to turn this off. And what this does is it turns off the touchscreen buttons that you see on screen in RetroArch. We don't want that because we have controls. We don't want to touch the screen. Head over, we're going to go over to input. And now what we're going to do is go to RetroPad binds, port 1 controls, and this is where you map the controls for your device to RetroArch. So the very first one is asking analog to digital type. Basically means, do you want to use the stick sometimes to map as a D-pad? And yeah, in some games I do want to do that, so I'm putting that on. Scrolling down, and now you just have to go through and map these. So D-pad up is up, down, left, right, and so on. So I'm going to do that now. You're going to see here that we just mapped A and B, and don't worry, we'll fix this, but I'm going to go to select, which is top, right, and just go through. Oh, that might be hard. There we go. And then I stop there. We don't need to map gun trigger or gun reload or anything like that. So all we did was map everything, and now go all the way up, and we're going to save controller profile. Back out one, back out again, and now we can go over to menu controls, and I'm going to turn menu swap OK and cancel off. And what that just did is now we can use B to back out and A to confirm, because that was driving me nuts. Head over to hotkeys, and we want to select a hotkey enable. And hotkeys are what will let you do fast forwarding in games or exiting the RetroArch and all of that. So my enable button is going to be L3. I like using L3 for that because we don't really use that in a lot of different games. So the next one is going to be menu toggle. And I'm going to set that to X. And what that means is when I push L3 and X in a game, it is going to open up the RetroArch menu. And it allows you to do a lot more different things. And I'll show you what that looks like after. For quitting RetroArch, this is very important. I'm going to select that to start, let's say. So that means when I push L3 and start, it is going to exit RetroArch. And you're going to see here that it is ensuring all save data and configurations are flushed to disk. This is very important. What I see a lot of people do is they push the home button to exit RetroArch. What that does is it corrupts your save data. You're going to notice that a lot in Game Boy Advance, especially. So if you push this and then you exit out RetroArch and you try and get back in RetroArch, it's gonna crash, and then you're always going to see crashes, and you're going to be very confused as to why that's happening. You want to exit using the hotkey, always. Never ever exit using home for any emulator, for anything. Never do it. So in this case, it is the L3 button and start to do so. We're going to scroll down, and I'm not going to do reset content because that seems weird. We're going to do fast forward as R2, so that means this in R2 as usual. Scrolling down, I'm going to do load state as L1 and save state as R1. And that just basically means that we can load our state with L1 and we can save our state with R1. And then I'm going to scroll all the way down. And the last one that I like to do is show FPS. Just sometimes you want to see it. And I'm going to set that to A. There, those are all of our hotkeys. We're going to back out and we're going to scroll down and you're going to see confirm quit. This is basically going to tell you when you push L3 and start to exit, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to do that? And I don't want to be annoyed, so we're going to turn that off. We're going to back out of there, and if you scroll down, there are a few things you can do here. We're going to jump into saving. Now, right now, the saving for any save files in RetroArch and states is in the internal storage, RetroArch folder, and then the saves and states folder. And so that's where all of those are, and you're going to see them sorted by the core. However, you can also enable two different functions here, and I would suggest if you're new to RetroArch to not enable these yet. But basically, this means auto save state and auto load state. So you can auto save state when you push L3 and start to exit the game to save where you were. And then auto load state will load exactly that same state when you boot up that game again. This can get quite dangerous for some people that just don't know how to undo a save state and all of that. So I personally enable these, but until you're familiar with RetroArch enough, I would leave this disabled for now, but come back to here later. Back out, and we're going to go over into achievements. If you want to do retro achievements like I do, you can put your username and password here, and I would highly suggest that you disable hardcore mode. And if you don't know what retro achievements are, you can find them on retroachievements.org, and you can get a username and password and earn some retro achievements in games. Otherwise, that is it for RetroArch. You can see how it was very simple, right? So we're going to go over here, and before we do anything else, we have to save everything we just did. So all I did was head over to the home screen, and we're going to go save current configuration. That saves all the changes we just did. Now, since we're going to be using a front end to launch all of our RetroArch games, it doesn't make much sense to set up RetroArch for loading games, but I'm going to show you how to just quickly load a game if you want to see it. So go over to load content, and you're going to go over to your SD card. It's going to be a bunch of numbers like this. If you put it on your SD card, or the internal storage is this one here. So we have our ROMs on the SD card. I'm going to go over here. And now I'm going to go over to ROMs, and I have all of my games here. So I'm just going to pick a game. Let's go with Game Boy Advance. And I'm just going to pick Advanced Wars. And it says Load Archive. That's exactly what we want. And now it gives you some options for suggested cores. But there's only one because we only grabbed one Game Boy Advance core. And it's that one right there, MGBA. So if I push that, we are now in a game. We can go and play. Got to turn that music down. We can now play this game and then do everything we want to do. All of this works, and this is all fantastic. Now remember, we set up some hotkeys. If I push L3 and X, that is going to open up the main menu in RetroArch for this game. And in here, you can see a whole bunch of different things and settings and all of that if you want to. And if you remember again, we changed a bunch of other things. So we put L3 as start, exit. So we are now completely out of RetroArch. Gone. RetroArch is gone. Do not use home to exit RetroArch. Remember again. Now I'm glad that we're here because there is one more thing we need to do in RetroArch. And if you remember before, I talked about BIOS files. And especially for RetroArch, we need them for Dreamcast and PlayStation 1. So what you can do is head over here. And I don't know if you already have them in here. It depends on if you do. But you're going to see here, if we go to Retroid Pocket 5, this is our internal storage. And if you go into the RetroArch folder, and if you go into System, this is where you would put your BIOS files. So if you have BIOS files, you're going to put them here. And I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to go over into my SD card, into my ROMs folder. Oops. And you're going to see the BIOS folder that I created. And I have a RetroArch folder. These are all of my RetroArch BIOS files. And you don't need to have all of these. You most likely just have for PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast. And those are in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of them. So I'm going to select one. Select all, and then what I'm going to do is copy to. And now we have to just choose where I'm copying it to. So I'm going to go over back into the internal storage. We're going to go back to RetroArch. I'm going to go into the system folder. I'm going to click copy. And it is now copying 17 items, and I think it already finished, so we're good. Now, just to double check it, I'm going to go into that folder, RetroArch, system, and I see them all. Perfect. To double check that that worked, we're going to open up a PlayStation 1 game. So load content, go over into the SD card, go over into ROMs, and I'm going to go to PSX for PlayStation 1, and I'm just going to pick the first one I see. And we got to go down to PlayStation, which is Swan Station. You're going to see it booted up. You're going to see the PlayStation logo. That is great. We are in the BIOS. That would not show up if it wasn't. So we are set. This game and all PlayStation 1 games have perfect compatibility now to just run normally. You don't want to do this without BIOS files. Make sure they're in there. Okay, so the next emulator that we want to do is Nintendo 64, because we do not use RetroArch for Nintendo 64, and there's a very specific reason. When you boot up some games in Nintendo 64 in RetroArch, they're broken, they don't run, there's texture glitches, all of that. Some games, not all games. So if you want perfect compatibility with Nintendo 64 games, we actually have to go to the Play Store and you have to sign in. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so once you sign in to Google Play Store, We're going to go over to the search section at the top. We're going to type in M64 plus FZ emulator or M64 plus FZ, and they have a paid and a pro version. I'm going to do it on the free version just so you can see, but I do have the paid version instead that I use. And we're going to go ahead and click play. And yeah, sure, we want notifications. And now the very first thing that you want to do is tell it where your Nintendo 64 ROMs are. So we're going to click plus, select folder, going to go over to our SD card, and because our ROMs are inside of here and N64, that's where we're going to select. And now it's going to import them all and give us some nice pictures and all of that, so we'll wait for that. Okay, so now we're here for Nintendo 64, and I'm going to go over into settings. Very first thing that I want to do is go into settings and data. Now, right now, it is saving behind Android's data storage. So if you make a save, it is very hard to get to. What I want to do is change that to external. And what we're going to be doing is putting this on our SD card. So I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm just going to call it M64 plus. And we're going to say use this folder. And what we did there is say, hey, for all of our save data, any data to do with M64 plus FZ, put it on our SD card so we can easily access it. And so that is the first thing I want to change, because if you make this change after you've done saves or played games, it'll erase them. Well, it won't erase them, but it won't move them over. So we're going to do that right away. Okay, so we're going to head back here now, and we go over to display. You can change the rendered resolution for any game, for every game. So if you want to set it for every single game to something like 1440 by 1080, let's say, to match the screen, you can do that here. Some games might not like that, but should work for most games. If you want to see the frame rate in games, you can do that here as well and put it top left, top right, center, wherever you want to do it. But let's back out, and the very first thing that we should be doing is going over to profiles, and we want to do a controller profile. And we have to create a new one. So we're going to click new, and you can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it RP5. This isn't a very good name for it because you might need different controller profiles depending on the game. Some games it's okay to use the stick as the C buttons. Some games you want to use these as C buttons. So you're going to be creating different profiles and using them for different games, and I'll show you how. But first, let's go ahead and map this. So I'm going to put L, R, Z. I'm going to use R2. Start is that, A. And you just go ahead and map this. And for right now, I'm just going to use the C pad as the right stick. And if you have extra buttons that you want to put as these other hotkeys, then you can do that too, but I don't really need to. If we push back, we just created our first controller profile, and that's great. If we head back again and we want to select profiles, and we want to make sure we're using that profile. So we're going to select controller 1 profile, and we're going to change that to RP5. Now we are actually using what we just created in all of these games. But let's say that you have to create a second controller profile, and let's say it's for Banjo-Kazooie. Go ahead and do all the stuff we just did, except you don't want to do the select profiles part. And what you're going to do is go over here and select Banjo-Kazooie, scroll all the way down, you're going to see settings. Anything you change here is for this specific game. So if you change the rendered resolution here, you're changing it for this game only. As well, if you scroll down, there is something called controller. And controller 1 profile, and you can change the controller 1 profile to something else. That is how you do it and how you change it for specific games. Let's go ahead and boot up a game. You're going to see something here. The touchscreen is showing up. And because this is the free version and we didn't pay for it, we got to watch an ad. So I suggest that you pay for the paid version. And now the buttons showed and disappeared. Because we aren't using touchscreen, they show up for a few seconds and they're gone. And now, if you use buttons, you can do whatever you want. But I want to show you how to exit. You push the back button on the bottom, or the back button on any handheld. But if you don't have a back button, just back. And that's how you do it. And you can do a bunch of stuff here. You can save state and load state and do all that stuff, but there's also an exit. And we want to click OK, and we are gone. Okay, so the next system that we're going to be doing is PlayStation Portable. And I have a longer, more complete advanced setup guide on this on my channel if you want to check that out. We're just going to be doing the normal get me up and playing Joey kind of setup here. So we're going to go to the Play Store, type in PPSSPP, and you're going to see it right there, and you're going to install that one. There is a gold version, it's a donated paid version, but it doesn't have any extra features, it's just if you want to support the developer. So go ahead and click play, and you're going to be questioned with the very first thing that you need to do. You never want to choose this option, ever. What you have to do is choose this option, and it tells you what it does, but it basically means that we're going to put all of our saved data on the SD card or internal storage, and it's easily accessible. So let that go and click OK. And now you want to go over to your SD card if you have one inserted and create a new folder. And you want to put all of this data on here instead of the internal storage if you have the option. Because there isn't a lot of internal storage on these devices. 128 gigabytes gets eaten up really quickly if you do a lot of different things. So we created a folder called PPSSPP, and we selected it. It's on the SD card, and we're going to click OK. All of our data is going to be in there from now on. The very first thing we want to do here is, again, tell it where our PSP games are. So we're going to go to Browse, and we're going to go to our SD card. We're going to go over to ROMs. We're going to go to PSP, because that's where mine are, and click Allow. And there we go. Those are all my PSP games, and they're right there, ready to be loaded. But obviously we can't jump in yet because there's some things we have to do. So we're going to go to Settings, and here is where you can change the resolution and all of that. For the Retroid Pocket 5, you can pretty much just set it to 1080p and leave it forever. Never have to change that. Now, if we scroll down, you can see that there is a Show FPS option and Show Speed if you want to see that stuff, so you can enable it there. Otherwise, let's go to Controls. We're going to turn off the on-screen controls because nobody wants that. Going to go over to Control Mapping, and this is where you map controls for PlayStation Portable. So let's clear everything that's there already, and we're going to do it ourselves. So up, left, right, and you can just look at a PSP if you want to know how to map it to what it looks like, or you can just follow my movements. I might be going a little bit quickly, so this is the boring part. And so we mapped all of that. Now, one other thing I like to map is speed toggle, and that's basically like a fast forward, and I set to R2. Everything else you don't need to touch. So we're going to go to Back, and next we're going to go to Tools. And if you have retro achievements, this is where you do it. And once again, make sure that hardcore mode is off because you don't want that. If we back out again, and back out again, we can now just load up a game. So I'm going to pick Dissidia. You're going to see we have some sort of thing, but the game is loading. We are playing. Now, what if you want to do an in-game menu? Push the back button. There you go. And if you want to do specific settings for this game, so let's say maybe 4X isn't working for you, create game config, game settings, and now you can change it for this game only. So that is the way to do it. You can also save state and all that fun stuff here if you want to. Now, another way to get there, if you don't have a back button, just there you go. Just use the back on the actual navigation. We can exit to menu because we're done with PlayStation Portable. Since we have the Google Play Store open, we're going to do Dolphin, and that handles GameCube and Wii. So we're going to type in Dolphin. We're going to try and type it. And we're going to try and find it. There it is, Dolphin Emulator. It says beta, but you're good. And click Install. If it asks you to be a beta tester, click yes. You do want to be a beta tester because you want to get the latest updates for Dolphin. So go ahead and click play. And sure, it doesn't matter if you want to send usage statistics. Usage statistics. Bear with me here. I've been recording. Okay, so now this is GameCube. This tab is Wii. We have to tell it where are our GameCube games and where are our Wii games. So click Add Game. I'm going to go back to the SD card, which you should be familiar with at this point, and go to GameCube. It's in my GC folder. And now you're going to see in a second, it's going to populate all of my GameCube games. If I do the same thing with Wii, Add Games, ROMs, I'm going to go to my Wii folder and Use folder, and you're going to see all of my Wii games are going to show up as well. Great. But if you've been following along, you know that's not it. So we have to go over into the settings on the top. Let's go into Config, General, and if you want to enable cheats, which I suggest you do, just do it there. And there's not much else you can do here. Save states are kind of broken, so I would not suggest them. But if we back out again, we're going to go to Graphics Settings. And here, for this device specifically, I would suggest using Vulkan. You might have to change this for some games if they're not looking right, but you know, and I'll show you how to do that. But for most part, you can leave it as Vulkan, and you want to compile shaders before starting. Go over into Enhancements, and you can change the internal resolution now For the most part, you can pretty much just leave this at 3x, which is the screen resolution of 1080p. So that's pretty great. There is nothing else you have to touch here. If you want to see the frame rate counter, you can go over to statistics and change it here, and you can show a few different things if you want. Let's back all the way out, and we're going to be over here into GameCube input, and this is going to be mapping the controller for GameCube. You want to click this little settings cog on the right, scroll down, and again, map it for GameCube. So I'm going to do it the way that it maps to these buttons, but you could do whatever you want. And actually Z, I like to use R1. Start is start. Very important here, you want to pay attention. When you do mapping of this, and I'm going to see if I can get it to do it. Mapping of the sticks. It usually does it on the right. Didn't do it. Let me see if I can get it. It's not doing it. Let me see if I can get it for the C stick. There we go. See how it says full access 11 plus? And if you look at the other ones, they don't say that. No other one said that. Access, access, access. This is something that not a lot of people talk about, but it is a weird bug. If I do this again, and I do it to the right, it's gone. I mapped it incorrectly. Depending on how you do this, it could show full tilt, and you do not want that. So make sure that they all say just access. Scroll down, and for triggers, this is important too. These are the actual triggers, so L1, or L2 and R2. And then for left analog and right analog, you want to make sure they're the same things too. There. If you don't do this, then for games like Mario Sunshine, where you want to have pressure-sensitive water, it's not going to work, so you have to do that. Scroll down, and we're going to do D-pad just to finish off here. And then you can go all the way up, and you can save this as a profile if you want. We're going to save it as RP5. Again, you might have different games, RP5. Again, you might have different games where you want different profiles for, and I'm going to show you how to do that for each game. But there, we have done it, and that's perfect. If we back out again, Wii input, and I hate the Wii so much. Same thing, we're going to head over to the settings cog here, and I'm going to show you how to do the classic controller. If you want to find out how to do Wii remotes and motion and all of that, Google is your best bet. Anything that does Android, Wii stuff, you'll be able to do it. I cannot do it. I just can't. So change the extension to classic. And this is going to be to set up the classic controller. You can click the little settings cog and just map the classic controller here. So I'm going to go there, and I never know which one is ZR and ZL, but I'm going to use L1 and R1. And same thing, map the sticks, making sure that it doesn't say full tilt. And there's my triggers, so I did it right. L1, and there, and then D-pad. So all we're doing there is basically saying any Wii games that have a classic controller, you'll be good with. If you need to use a Wii remote or a nunchuck or anything like that, then not the right guide for this. Back out, back out, back out. We are set, but I want to show you some other stuff because we're not done. So let's say I go into a GameCube game. We're going to go into Animal Crossing. Oh no, there's touchscreen. Oh, Joe, you didn't tell me how to replace that. Well, let me show you. Click the back button, or once again, back. Go over into overlay controls, and you want to go to toggle controls, and we're going to toggle all. And boom, they're gone. Amazing. You can also do some other stuff here if you want in this little settings thing, but you don't have to. Either way, this works. We can play this and have some fun. But remember how I said before, what if you have a different control scheme for F-Zero GX, or maybe it doesn't run well and you need to make some specific changes for that game? Push and hold, go over to edit game settings, and boom. Any changes you make here will only affect F-Zero GX. Great. You can also find some cheats there and stuff. I have a dedicated Dolphin guide for widescreen hacks and all of that, so you should check that out if you want to get more advanced with this stuff. We are still in the Play Store here, so we're going to do 3DS emulation next, and that is called Lime 3DS as of today. There's going to be something new out in the future, so this will be out of date at some point, but hopefully they keep the same name and everything, because that'll just be easy. Go ahead and click play. Going to go click get started, and we have to give it permissions and notifications, and yeah, we're going to do that. Very first thing you have to do is select a user folder. And if you've been paying attention, we want to put that on the SD card. So go over to the SD card, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Lime 3DS. Click Done and use this folder. All of our data is going to be in that folder on the SD card. Makes it easy to get to saves and all of the other stuff that you want. Click Next. Next, we have to tell it where are our games. So where do we have our 3DS games? I'm going to click Add Games. Go over to the SD card. Go over to the ROMs folder, and you're going to see an N3DS folder because that's what mine's called. And I'm going to click Use this folder. Go over, click Next, and click Continue. And boom, there's all my 3DS games. But again, nothing's going to happen if we play them because we didn't map anything. So we got to go over to Settings. And we're going to go over to Settings here. And now the first thing you want to do is go over to Gamepad and map your gamepad for 3DS. And so you can stop at D-pad button because it tells you right here, you can only map these if you're having issues with the D-pad not being recognized. So you don't have to do those, but you do want to do the triggers. So we're going to pop down. Those are actual triggers, I think. So we're going to go L2 and R2, and I think I screwed up. Yep, there we go. CL and there. If you want to map any hotkeys, if you have any buttons left, then feel free to do so, but I never do that. Head back, and we're going to go to Graphics. This one, you want to set to Vulkan. You want to set asynchronous shaders to on, and internal resolution is where you change the resolution. Now, unfortunately, Lime 3DS doesn't have per game settings as of yet, which means that whatever you change here is going to affect every single game. So if you have one game that wants OpenGL instead of Vulkan, just can't do that. So just keep that aware. There is nothing else that you have to touch here, except, again, I've done a dedicated Lime 3DS video if you want to learn about widescreen or HD texture packs and all of that. So you can check that out if you want. Otherwise, we are back out. And here, there is not much else you have to do. If you have any updates or games that are CIA formatted, you can install them here. And I would suggest that you keep them as CIA for updates, but 3DS decrypted for the actual games. And if you go over here, we're just going to pick game. And oh no, there is touchscreen again. And I think you've been paying attention. We're going to push the back button, going to go to overlay options, and we're going to take off show overlay. You can also show FPS if you want. It's right there. But you're going to see now that we have no more buttons and all that. And we have a layout here. And this is all personal preference. You can change the layout right here if you want. Maybe you want side by side. Depends. Go through and choose whatever you want as a layout and that, or map the swapping layouts to L3 or R3, and you can do that too. Have some fun. Okay, so next one is going to be PS2 emulation, and as of today, it is still Nether SX2. So it's not anywhere that you could find. All of the websites are wrong. Do not go to a nethersx2.com or anything like that. Nether SX2. And do not go to that one. This one, Trixarian Nether SX2 patch. Perfect. It's what we want. Scroll over to the right. You're going to see releases. You're going to grab the latest release. As of today, it is still 1.9 dev. And so what you want to do, scroll down, and you want to grab the one that says Nether SX2 Delta or X Delta. So it's the third one there. Grabbing that, scroll down again, and there is a resources. You're not going to see it. Click assets, and you want the APK, 4248 APK. Download it anyways. Great, we have the two things we need. Going to go over to the Play Store, and we have to patch those because Nether SX2 doesn't have an APK ready to go. So we're going to go over to Store and type in Unipatcher. And install. Now, I've been told that this might not work on some devices. So what you can do is go to their GitHub. And so back to Chrome, let's say. If you can't get it on the Play Store, type in Unipatcher in Google, and it's the first one there by Btimoviv. I don't know how to say that, but if you go here, go to the GitHub, go to the releases, you're going to see a new release as of 10 hours ago, so they're on the ball, and you can grab the APK right there instead of from the Play Store. It's two different ways to skin a cat. Head over, we're going to open it, and now we want to select the patch file, and the patch file is going to be that Nether SX2 Delta. Great. The ROM file is going to be the 4248 APK. Great. Output file is going to be in the downloads folder, and that's fine. And it's going to say that, that's fine. Just click save. Click the little icon in the bottom right, and patching is complete. What we just did there is made a Nether SX2 APK. If you go into your Files app and you head over into your downloads folder, you should see it. Oops. You should see it here, and I can't see it because of the list. There. patched APK. So we're going to click that. It's going to tell you, oh no, stuff is wrong. Don't worry. Click OK. Install. And it's installed, and now we can set up NetherES X2. So you want to click Next, and you want to click Next, and you want to click Next again. And this is the very first thing you have to do is import BIOS. Now, remember when I talked about BIOS files? You should have already set this up, and I said in my description, I have a list of BIOS files that you need to find, and I can't tell you the sources, but I can tell you that you have to do them. So I'm doing that here, and I'm going to select my BIOS file, and boom. You want to make sure you select it, and off we go. Game directories. You want to tell it where are your PS2 games. So if you've been following along, it's in our PS2 folder, which is in our ROMs folder. It's on our SD card, and I'm going to select that. That's awesome. Click Next, and finish. It's going to import all of my PS2 games. Awesome. Keep going. Okay, so it imported all of my games. Great. First thing we have to do, go top left, and you want to go over to app settings. And over here, we're going to go down. If you want to see some frame rate information, scroll down on general, and you're going to see it at the bottom here. It says show FPS, show speed, all of that if you want. Otherwise, go to graphics tab, and I would change this to Vulkan, and then I would change upscale native resolution to whatever you want. You could set this to 3x and leave it, and then you're going to have to change it for some games that just are not going to work at that upscale, but I'll show you how to do that. You can also scroll all the way over. There is BIOS here and achievements. If you want to enable retro achievements, you can do that here and have some fun. Otherwise, let's head back. We're going to go back into settings and controller settings. Now we want to go to the touchscreen, and we want to turn off touchscreen because we don't want touchscreen controls. And if we head over to controller port 1, we have to map our controls for a PlayStation 2. So again, let's just go ahead and do it. Now, remember that thing I talked about in Dolphin where it would sometimes do full tilt? Watch out for that here as well, because it does happen here. You can map all the way up to right stick left, and then if you want to do some hotkeys, go all the way over to the right, and you can do toggle fast forward, for example, and maybe you want it to be L3. I don't know, it all depends. You can make it two different things if you want, L3 and R2. Choose whatever you want and make whatever binding you want. All depends on what you're looking to do. And there's more hotkeys here if you want to set some other stuff up. Head back, and there's nothing else we have to do settings-wise, so let's just boot up a game. And you're going to see here that it's going to load, and if you have your BIOS in and all that, it's going to start playing the game, and that's all cool. We'll wait a second while it figures out how to do things. And there you go, it's starting to load. Remember again, if you push the back button, or once again, slide up that, you can get to the menu. Look at the top here. If you click the eye, any changes you make here are for this specific game only. If you click the settings cog, any changes you make here are for every single game. So just be careful of that distinction, 1, 2, of whatever you want to do. But you can also do load state, save state, and other stuff here if you want to. Okay, so now we'll do Vita 3K, and Vita 3K is not on the Play Store, so we're going to go over to Chrome again. I'm going to type in Vita 3K. You're going to see the website, vita3k.org. Going to click the settings over at the top, go to download, pick your build, and we are on Android, so we want Android. It brings us to their GitHub, and the latest release as of today is 12. So if we scroll down, you're going to see the APK. You want to download that, and download anyways. And now you want to open it. Click install. And you click open. So very first thing we want to do is select the language, and we're going to do English. Here is important. Right now, by default, it wants it to be on the internal storage behind Android's data storage, and you can't access your save files or anything else, and that's not cool. So we're going to change the emulator path the same way we did for other emulators. You want to allow access, so click OK. And now go back to your SD card, and we're going to create a folder called Vita 3K, and that's where all of that stuff is going to be saved. Vita 3K. Done. And use this folder. And that's great. And now my screen all screwed up, but you can see the OK buttons on the bottom here. I'm going to click OK. And now you can see if I can fix the screen. Nope, it doesn't like it. Blame the emulator. Now we have to download these firmwares. And thankfully, if you click them, it tells you how to do it. So we're going to go download. And what I like to do here is scroll down and it says download update. And we're going to hold and click. I'm going to open a new tab. And it just started downloading that file. It's great. Let's go back. Go over to download font package, and we're going to download that, and it just does it automatically. It's awesome. We don't need to do anything. Back again, and let's just go right back to Vita. We have to install both those files we just downloaded. So go to install firmware file, go over here, and we can go to recent. Might be easiest. You can see them both there, so just do one at a time. We'll do the first one, let it install. Okay, and that took me a good couple of minutes, and you're going to see it's installed because it's a V instead of an X. So we're going to install firmware file, and we're going to do the next one, which is this one here. And there we go. You can see both are V because we installed both of them. We can go next, and next, and yeah, that's awesome. And now there's a big notice that is bulbous, and we want to click show next time. And because my thing is broken, I can't actually get rid of it. So I'm going to have to go back in. And there, we are back in. Create new user. You can put a name if you want. I'm just going to leave it as user1 because I'm user1. I'm special. And there we go. We are now in Vita 3K, and we can do some stuff. Very first thing we want to do, I'm not going to touch anything configuration-wise, although you can go here and mess around with upscaling and all of that, but I would suggest that you do not do that for Vita 3K. But we do want to go to Controls, Overlay, turn off Show Gamepad Overlay, so no more touchscreen. And then you want to go back to Controls. Hold on. No. We want to go back. We're just going to go back to Controls and click it off there. And then go to Controllers. You're going to see Retroid Pocket Controller, or whatever your controller is called. Click that. And now just make sure these are all mapped properly. The ones that aren't on the Retroid Pocket 5 are these buttons. So we're going to change those. Now we should be good. You can double check all of them if you want. Just go through and tap and select, and we should be good. Now you want to install your games, and the way that I do it is you go to File, Install Zip, select File, and then go to your Vita directory and install your Vita game, and then you can play it. And then off you go, and you can play some games. Nothing else to show here. Okay, so the next one we want to do is CMU, and it is a Wii U emulator for Android. So go over to Google, and this one's a bit harder to find. You want to go CMU SSIMCO for Simco. And you're going to see he has a GitHub repository right here. And you're going to see CMU. If we scroll down, we want to go to releases. And the latest release was about a month ago as of today. And you want to grab that APK. This might be in a different spot in the future, and I'll update the description with where to find it if it is, but that's how you install it today. And go to open. Now we have no games. We have to tell it where are our Wii U games. So we're going to go into settings. We're going to go to general. We're going to add a game path and click the plus icon in the top. All your Wii U games should be in the WUA format, and I am in the ROMs folder. And if I select there we go. Those are all them. If I go back, they're all going to show up here. Awesome. Let's head back to settings, and we're going to go to input settings this time. Go to input overlay, and you don't want the input overlay because we don't want to have touchscreen controls. So we're going to go back. Controller 1, it is currently disabled, and it's going to depend on what you need to use for the games. Right now there isn't per game controls, so I'm going to do, let's say, gamepad. And you want to map it for the Wii U gamepad. I apologize for any fingers that you see, finger marks. I usually clean it in between each emulator, but we gotta tap a lot. I could do this by just using the controls, but it would take me longer, and you don't have that time. You can map the extras if you need to, but I never do. Head back, and now go over to graphics settings. There isn't anything I wouldn't touch here, but there is one thing I do want to show you. So if we head back, we installed all our games. When you install your games, you can head over to graphic packs, and you click this little download button, and it's going to download any compatibility or graphics packs for each game. So if I scroll down and I go over to Breath of the Wild, you're going to see some stuff here, enhancements, and you can see what it does, and if you want to enable any of this stuff, and graphics, if you want to enable any of this stuff, and so on. And there's cheats and mods and all of that fun stuff here that you can add and fix. And New Super Mario Brothers, for example, there is a mod that removes HUD, and you can go through and do all of this if you want. Otherwise, just head back and pick a game And now you're playing this game. And that's awesome. And if you want to exit this game, it's exit like that, exit, as of today. Okay, so next up to show is streaming apps, and I'm not going to show installing the streaming apps because that's going to be person-to-person dependent, but I will tell you which ones to use. First up, for PlayStation Remote Play, you want to use the app called PX Play. PX Play Remote Play. It is not the official app because the official app only works with Sony DualSense 5 devices. So you have to use this one, and it is a paid app. I'm pretty sure it was like $6 or something. Use that for PlayStation Remote Play. For Xbox, you want to use the app called XP Play. XP Play. XP Play lets you do remote play, local play, whatever you want. If you have an Xbox, you can play from it. If you don't have an Xbox and you want to use Game Pass Online, you can do that. Great. Those are the two. Then there's also GeForce Now. It's another one that you can use. And that is more if you don't own any systems and you want to use cloud gaming and all of that. It's very good, but expensive. Another option. And then local play would be Moonlight if you want to do it from a computer. So you have a few different options. Okay, we're at the near end of this video. You have all your emulators. Right now you're probably just launching them, games individually, opening an emulator, playing a game, all that. Why don't we just do a front end? The front end, you can go over to PlayStation or to the Play Store. We're going to search for something called Daigisho. Daigisho. Like that. And scroll past the ads. There we go. Daigisho by Tapioca Fox. We're going to install that. And what this basically will do, when you push the home button, it'll go to Daigisho. And it'll have all your emulators and games there and nicely looking. And you can just basically turn this into a console instead of an Android phone. So right now we just opened it. And there's nothing here. So we're going to go over to Download Platforms, which is right here. And whatever games that you have on the device, just select. So I have Atari, I have Final Burn Neo, I have Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, GameCube, and so on. Just import whatever you want, and I'm going to click import just with the ones we have. Now, right now, it's not going to do anything. We didn't tell it where the games are, and we didn't tell it what emulators we're using. So what we want to do is select Paths for Atari, and we're going to do Add More, and just go to where your Atari games are, or whatever system that you're doing. So mine, as usual, are in my ROMs folder, Atari, and select it. And I'm going to click Sync. And now you're going to see that it is finding all of my Atari games and going to put little box art and nice previews and all that stuff. However, if we try and launch that, it is not going to work. So what we need to do is tell it, what are we using to play Atari? Click the little pencil at the bottom right. And we have to go down here, and you're going to see right here, Player Settings. And this one actually happens to be correct. It is. You can ignore this first number. That means nothing. But it's going to be RetroArch 64. It's the 64-bit RetroArch that we downloaded. And it is the Stella Core. That is right. It's not always going to be right. For example, Game Boy Advance usually gets this wrong. So if we go to GBA, you're going to see right here, it says BBA Next. If you remember from before, we installed MGBA. So what you do, you select it, and you're just going to scroll down into RetroArch, not that one, not 32, right into 64, and it's going to go MGBA. Perfect. Click Save, and when we add our GBA games and all of that, then you can play them. So that is the first thing you want to do. Next thing, you can see all of your apps here. This can be what you boot into. So when you boot into the device, when you turn it on, it'll go right here. And so what we need to do, because you have access to all your apps, is go to Settings. Go over to System Settings, and we're going to go to Apps. I'm going to go over to Default Apps, and see how the home app is Quick Step? Go here, and you want to change it to Daigisho. And now, when we push the home button, we are going to Daigisho. And if I open up the Clock app, and it wants to send me notifications, sure, why not? But when I'm done with the Clock app, hey, we're back to Daigisho. If I turn off the device and turn it back on, we are coming right to Daigisho. It's great. Now, go over to Settings. One thing you want to do is head over to Library. And I have a full Daigisho setup guide, so if you want to learn a lot more, then I would suggest looking at that. But you want to scroll down, and what you want to do is disable player warnings. You do not want that. It's going to annoy you. Just turn that off. And also, you can go over to Settings. Oops, we're going to back out of here. And you can change the appearance, you can change the wallpaper pack. So basically, instead of it looking like this, you can have a whole bunch of fun different wallpapers and all of that. And that's kind of it. The retro achievements that are here is just showing your retro achievements profile, and it'll show it in the widget. You don't need that. It doesn't really do anything. It just shows you. It has nothing to do with retro achievements beyond just being a quick access to the website. Otherwise, you load all of your games through here. So I'm just going to quickly add my GBA games just to show you, and you'll do this for every system. But we did that. So you're going to, two things you want to make sure of: path and changing the emulator to make sure it matches what we installed. And now you can see that it pulled all of my Game Boy Advance games. If I select Advance Wars, boom, we are now playing Advance Wars. Remember before when I said do not use home to exit? What happens when I push home to exit? This is exactly what happens. We just broke RetroArch because we exited using the wrong way. When you exit using home, you break RetroArch. And it's going to say not responding in a second. Or I might have to force it to say not responding. Or we might have crashed the entire thing. See? We broke it. Now, let me show you the right way. Go back to home. Let's say we play some Advance Wars. Boom! Advance Wars is working. Hooray! Yay! I want to leave Advance Wars. Gonna do that. Now I want to play Advance Wars 2. Oh, wow, it worked. Never ever use this to exit games. You just saw why. Honestly, that is it. That is all I had on the docket for today. I'm doing the wrong thing to exit. There we go. That is it. So now you can enjoy your system because it's all set up. And if you want to do this in chunks, you definitely can. You don't have to do everything in one day, even though we just did this pretty quickly and by a standard type of setting a thing up. But just enjoy it. Just go slowly, and you should be able to do this pretty easily. If you have any questions, you can check out my Discord in the description and come join me there. It'll be better than any comments that you put on the video. Just easier to help you if you run into something, but definitely first try before you come over into a Discord and go all huffy puffy. Either way, enjoy your system. You can now have a lot of fun playing some games and go from there. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about retro handhelds. Support me on Patreon if you like my stuff. And hope you all have a good one.